Hello, welcome back everyone. Let's see, quick status. I am first on the list. I had a call with Juan Satish on LMP last week, and there's been some discussion. Satish, you also have like an item on the status with updated the discussion. I assume that link goes to the GitHub discussion. So if you wanna tell everyone a bit about that, feel free to do so.
Sure. So last week started off with discussion with Dan, Francisco, Leyland, Juan, myself, and Adrian. But I think the core discussion happened with just three, like me, Juan, and Adrian. Like, how do we really do the mapping? But the goal was two different aspects. First one was like the mapping itself, like how do we map the existing JSON to the OCP TV formatted JSON. And then number two is like, where do we need to do that mapping? Is it like natively, or is it going to be an abstraction layer so that any binary can be replaced underneath? So I think we just touched base both the topics, but we deep dive in the first one, like how do we do the mapping? And I think the GitHub discussion has much more detail, but the long story short is we are trying to move away from having a single device as a hardware info. Instead, if we can have a single link as a hardware info, so that because in any sender receiver link, the problem could be in either side, and it's very hard to determine which device to be worked upon. So who I was saying, hey, can we, especially the retimers, which doesn't have a component ID or a BDF to begin with, it's going to be hard to have a hardware info pointing to a single device. So we were looking at, can we have a single link as a hardware info so that we can pinpoint to which receiver and which lane has the problem. So that's where we are. That's where we stand right now, like having a single link. So how do we denote a single link? It could be a pair of BDFs. It's one option. So I think the discussion has. So Adrian, do you want me to present, or is that just how do you want?
So at this point, I'm just looking for a quick status of
Okay,
what happened. We can go into details after the status section.
sounds good. Yeah. So in that case, yeah, we just took a first shot of mapping all whatever we have. I think we have some good place to start. And but the next thing, I didn't get a chance to put together a real sample and like how it looks like when we run the test and how the output looks like. That's something still TBD. But yeah, I think we have some place to start right now.
Okay. Thanks, Satish. Go ahead, Dan.
Just because I had to leave a few minutes early before we wrapped up, I wanted to get Wall's perspective as well and make sure that he was happy with what we lined up with.
In fact, that's his proposal. But yeah, well.
Yes, definitely. I think we were converging on something, and yeah, with everyone's input, we're mapping the lane margining result to the output format, and I think it's a good solution. Yeah, we can. I think we should write it up and maybe give a sample. The next step is to come up with a sample and demo what we have.
Cool. And then maybe one other thing to add, and then we can move on, Adrian. The reason why I think that this is probably okay from our usual approach of trying to model a single piece of hardware is because we don't see the STAG being used for like repair operations and things as frequently. We see it more like a hardware validation to determine, link margins. So we'll probably want to target down to the individual component and, the ambiguity of the bus, which is something that comes up again and again and again.
Yes, and because the margining is done at the receiver, when I fail, it doesn't really pinpoint at the receiver. It could be the transmitter, right? So it's really about the link, not like falsely pointing to a particular hardware.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll add one more quick thing to that. Not for discussion right now, but this concept of multiple things and the relationship between them. In this case, it's like the link between two PCI devices. Before we had like discussion on a server client topology. How do you call like the connection between them? we should probably like at least give some examples or guidance somewhere around these items, because it does seem to come up frequently, and the hardware component right now is stated as it needs to be a physical component, and that like confuses people.
Yeah. I think one thing I was looking at is like if we can have some kind of hardware info which can point to two components instead of just one component. Like currently, I want some component pointed to one hardware info, or something like that, like so that we can have a single identity or entity which point to two components. Then that becomes a link. So if something goes bad, we can still have a link as hardware info, but pointing to two hardware infos within it.
Well, I think
So
I think other than a component, when we do testing, there should be a concept of integration, right? We're doing system testing. So integration is putting multiple components together. For this link, it's not just two components, multiple. There's a PCBA, there's, if you consider redriver in it, there's edge connectors, a lot of things in the path. So it's multiple components come into an integration concept.
So I've added an item on the agenda. If we have time today, we can go into that. Otherwise, next time, just so we don't miss this. All right. Next up is Igor.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, so I modified memtester so that it produces artificial errors. And I found that there was a bug with parsing of one of the error types. That one is fixed now, so looks like it's working properly now. Also, I wrote a user guide so that people can read it and use the diac properly. And finally, I added a logging capability of memtester's raw output. It's very useful for debugging, especially when you have error messages from the parsing library, because it basically points out the line numbers, and it's useful to just get that raw output and see where some unexpected sequence of symbols appears or something like that. I think everything is ready for review, so I'll create a pull request, I think, today. Just wanted to share some observation. So currently I report memtester's version as a log message, but it looks like we have a dedicated functionality for reporting software versions. The problem is that this has to be done before you create a test step. And sometimes this is inconvenient. For example, in my case, I have callbacks, and when memtester outputs strings, these callbacks get called, and version callback basically happens after I create a test step. So I cannot use software info functionality for reporting memtester. Well, I can if I run memtester for the second time, but this just adds some additional complexity.
Is this, Igor, is this a problem for the test step specifically, or do you need it even before the test to run artifact?
So the thing is, when I run callbacks, when callbacks can be called, I need to have a test step so that if some callback is called, the result of this callback can be reported in a test step.
Okay,
right?
But at this point, the test to run message has been outputted, right? Because you already know that you started the run. And
Exactly.
Okay, so in the test run, there is a version field. And that version field is technically meant for the diagnostic version, but in this case, it kind of identifies with the memtest binary, right?
Okay. So basically, if I have a test step, then I can just report software version. inside of test step as opposed to inside of a dot.
You can do that as well. I'm not sure it's the same thing that I'm saying though.
Oh, you said in a test run, not in a test step, right?
Yeah, in test run, there's a field which says the version of the diag.
Let me check if I can use that.
All right.
Okay.
Like ping me on Slack if you need help.
Can I interject? Igor, so I've solved that problem in the past by running the binary once ahead of time with the like -- version. So you can like run the binary first just to get the version and then run it a second time to actually run the workload.
Yeah, of course. This is one of the solutions. It just requires one more run. Obviously, we can do that.
Go ahead, Don.
I was actually going to propose the same thing because it seems like if you needed to do the compatibility check, you might want to do that before you tried to run it anyway. So I think we're all aligned there. I did have a question though for you, Igor. I was wondering, what was the mechanism you decided to finalize on for the error injection? Was it EINJ or something different that you did?
For error injection, I stopped working on it for now because I wanted to finish memtester itself first. What I did, I modified memtester to produce errors. But later, I still want to continue this QEMU thing.
So let me know if you're done with the updates, Igor.
I am done with updates.
All right, thank you. So I think you made the right decision there. I have an item on the agenda that I'll explain in a second. In the meantime, I had an action item to get you in touch with Anil from the fault management and injection project. I have asked Karen to send an email with both of you. She's in the US right now, so it might take a bit. But your post on that anyway. So I wanted to add to this. I have been getting some questions from another team internally, which is dealing with hardware related stuff, and they want to test some specific hardware that I cannot go into detail about right now. But the things that we have, which are general enough, like SAT and memtester and PCI crawler, like these are applicable there as well. So it would be beneficial if we get all of these to work as soon as possible, because there's like another venue to explore. So to your work right now, Igor. This is why I was saying, finishing the diag and making it compile and fully usable is a good thing to have right now. Okay.
Okay. I see.
Okay. I don't see any other status items on the agenda. I don't know if everyone managed to put something in there. I would be interested if Young has any updates on VC.
Yes. So first, I will send a separate email to you and Dan about what we are going to present at OCP. And second, I remember you were going to try VC in OCP and Lenovo labs, and you were hitting issues with installing things from NuGet, which is a .NET package store. So I added VC to all the common apt repo and the distributions. So I was sending instructions on how to install VC from App Store. So maybe you can help try it out there.
Okay, nice. Thank you, Young.
Yeah. Let's update. I will. It's just 2 slides with like we just mentioned. We are onboarding the OCP TV schema, and also we're going to help this team facilitate with spec validation and also like running the lab. So I will send the slides. It's like 3 sentences.
Yeah, we'll continue on this topic in a second. Dan, you have a question?
I actually have another topic, so let's finish this one and then.
So I've added on the agenda for today if to check if the OCP presentations are ready for next week for the couple of presentations that will require the 1 or 2 slides from our project here. So that's why I'm saying we can continue this in a second. Do you wanna? Would you like to interject now, Dan, with a different topic, or do we continue with this one?
Let's finish this one, and then mine should be really quick. It's more probably of an agenda for other things. Well, actually, maybe I'll just do it. We have another team that has joined our team recently, and they have been driving a lot of the OCP fault management work with Intel and AMD and now ARM, and they're heavily invested in the CPR logging format. I don't know if you guys are familiar with this or not, but it's the Common Platform Error Record, I believe is what it stands for. And it's really not much of a format, to be honest. It's like a little header and a giant blob of meaningless stuff that you then need to know how to decode, right? We could include this in our format, or we can include it as metadata as well, because honestly, something needs to break it down into something meaningful anyway. But I did want to get this on the agenda for another topic. I'm going to get with our lead that's driving this, and we're going to propose a potential extension. But I wanted to give everyone a heads up since it potentially could be a change to the format. But it's an extension. I think it would be an innocuous change, but you know, less dangerous words have never been said.
So this item with CPR logging, this came up before. I was just mentioning Anil with like a fault management project. I don't know if it's the same project you're talking about, Dan. I know there's multiple people involved in it from multiple companies, and it's another OCP project.
I suspect it is. It's probably the same one.
All right. So if it's the same one, I was talking to Anil like a couple of months ago about this, and he was asking me like, how do we make this CPR logs that we are using in the memory fault injection to work with the test and validation output. So we're gonna continue that discussion basically.
Okay. Who is the gentleman you mentioned?
Anil Agrawal. I think he's been on the calls here.
Okay, on the meta side though, correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
If I remember correctly, he's actually driving the fault management project.
Okay.
Yeah, so yeah, I was there for a bit. Yes, you're right. He was driving along with a few Intel folks.
That'd be awesome. When you get a moment, would you mind pinging his name in chat or contact info? Thank you.
I'll send you an email with both of you. Okay, so the OCP presentations. This was actually a question for you, Dan. Like you made those slides. Have you coordinated with everyone on how to incorporate those, like with Barun, with Young?
So I sent over the slides to Arun, and I have not had a chance to tie off with Young yet. But I can do so right after this call if that works for you, Young.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you.
Okay.
All right, and Arun, do you need anything else from Dan? Are the slides ready?
Yeah, our slides are ready. I'm still thinking of where to put the two that he has sent in the flow of things. And yeah, it should be fine. I'll ask Dan if I need something stuff before the talk.
All right, thanks, Aaron. And I think we had another one from Microsoft, from Bhushan, with the GPU compliance, their presentation, but I don't see any of them in the call today. So I don't know. Would you like me to ping them, Dan? Do you want to handle talking to Bhushan yourself?
Yeah, I had spoken to Sejoy on our side who's involved with that, and we did inject like one sort of just like a call out to the OCP diags, but we didn't go into a lot of detail there.
All right, so that one is done then.
Yeah, that's on the GPU management project. I wanted to make sure we're talking about the same thing, right?
GPU compliance.
Yeah, there you go.
You know,
Perfect.
Bhushan insisted on compliance. And the CTAM repo is the name that we're using.
Okay. Yep, we're aligned.
All right, I'll put that in the notes. Quick question. Do we want to skip next week because of the summit?
I won't be here, so I'm okay with that.
Yeah, I agree. I think in general we should skip next week.
Okay. Anyone against skipping? All right. So guess we'll skip next week.
I'm just wondering if it's at all possible for this group that goes to the OCP to have like a quick coffee chat some morning. Just wondering. So that because I'm from Seattle, so maybe we can meet in person. Just wondering.
I didn't fully get that, Young. What
No,
was your
just
question?
if it's possible for the people in this group that's going to the summit to meet, I don't know, maybe Wednesday morning over coffee.
Oh
like
yeah,
yeah.
Dan was asking about this as well earlier. This is gonna happen offline, right, Dan? On an email?
Yeah, we're going to try to coordinate that way. I'm going to be out of town, Young, so I may miss you, but I was going to see if anyone was going to be there at the tail end of the summit.
The other thing is that those who are on the floor will be there. We'll catch up on the event as well. So
Okay.
it'll happen.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Right. So since we're done with the status.
Sorry, Adrian. Yang, are you going to be at the event?
Yes.
Okay. Are you interested in having a dinner with if it happens?
Oh, definitely. Just let me know which day we might have like a Microsoft dinner. So just want this.
Okay. Yeah, I'll include you in the email.
Thank you so much.
All right. Since we're done with the status section, we can talk about the hardware components, physical concepts thing, or George was on the call. Yeah, George, you had some questions from Slack. I don't know if you want to present those or ask them here, like for everyone to be aware of.
Sure. Yeah, I can make it quick. I was just commenting that the OCP diag spec deals only with output format like JSON strings, but it's missing some things that we find important at Google, like the return code. For example, we use the return code to know if the diag has crashed or not, but that's not specified anywhere in the specs. So, I'm kind of worried that over time we're going to have like a proliferation of different behaviors and return codes, and it's going to be difficult to handle. So I don't know if it makes sense to add it to the existing spec or have like some other spec that covers binary packaging, but maybe that's something we should discuss. Thanks,
George. So a bit of context. I see your hand, Dan. I was talking to George about this, and it came up that maybe we should have like an annex or an addendum to the spec, like a different spec, not this one specifically, because this one is about output, on the topic of packaging for the diags. Because we haven't spoken a lot about this, but there is like an inherent assumption by this point that the diags are kind of binary and that you can run them from different executors and like watch the output, but they also may produce output in files, in different files. And with the error codes thing that George just mentioned, all of this, I think, can go into like this packaging format document. Go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, I mean, you actually nailed on what I wanted to say. When we were discussing it originally, George, the reason why we didn't get into error codes and things like that is we were having discussions. Well, maybe the diag output was coming over a serial port and things like that, right? Where we try to keep it very abstract and not bring in like, POSIX concepts. But that being said, none of that has ever really happened. They're all executables. So maybe to Adrian's point, the addendum is the right way to go. Say what we would extend for, binaries running on a computer potentially or something.
Okay. Yeah, I'll put this in the agenda. We may go into more detail at a different time, or maybe I'll start a discussion on GitHub and we can like do some stuff offline there as well. All right. Thanks, George, for the question. We have like 20-ish minutes if we want to talk about the LMT hardware components thing that came up. Quick question before that, Vincent, did you manage to do the connection on DIMMs for Marcos's question last time?
Yeah, I did chat with the DIM expert, resident expert in the team at Meta and put them in touch. That happened just yesterday. So I don't think that there's definitely interest. So hopefully Changduk and Marcos connect soon.
Yeah, I received and passed this along to our quality folk who are looking into this, and got the feedback that their phase 2 is DIMMs, and phase 1 they're working on a different subcomponent.
And yeah, I think best is to report back on this maybe in about 6 weeks or so to this team, because I expect this is going to take a little while to take off.
Yeah. So I sent my ping out last night to our folk. They're out of the Taiwan, so I just saw the response this morning. So
thanks, Marcos.
Okay,
thank you, Vincent. The thing that just came up on the chat. Do we have a presentation on SSD and NVMe diags? I know one person from Meta who's dealing with the diags themselves, but I don't know if there's an OCP presentation on that.
Yeah, there is. That's the one that's coming out of our storage team, and they're working with the Meta team right now. I believe Karen's actually involved on that because I think I saw a comment from her on one of the slides.
Who was this again?
I think Karen actually had a comment on one of the slides, so I think she's seen them.
Yeah, Karen is involved in more than just one OCP project there. I know Venkat is like on the technical implementation aspect, but he's not here today. He let me know earlier that he's missing this one. And there's like Vinit Parekh and Ross Stanford. I don't know if those names are familiar to you, Dan.
No, but Venkat is one of the authors on the slide deck, so he definitely is.
Oh, yeah, so there is one. Okay, I'll talk to him separately then to see if he got the slides from you to include.
He does. I got the whole deck.
You have. Okay,
yeah,
then I'll add that to the agenda discussion for today and consider it done.
Yeah, and the reason why I sent the slides sort of separately is they had requested not to send the entire deck because they didn't want to sort of like steal their thunder before the OCP presentation.
All right, perfect. All right, so to the question on chat earlier, there's like 4 different talks that have a reference to test and validation now.
Yeah, that's perfect. I'm capturing, it looks like 2, the SSD one and the OSFCI one is happening on Wednesday. So I'm putting them in our meeting notes. I am going to look up, it looks like, Arun, do you have 2 talks or just 1?
I have another talk that's not at OCP. So that's at the Linux Foundation Summit in Monterey. So, and then we have an experience center thing at OCP as well.
So is this going into the Linux summit as well?
Yeah, so that was sort of the idea, is that the plan was to mention briefly at the Linux Foundation Summit as well. I'm not really sure about where we insert that, because that slide deck is very different to what we have at OCP.
Well, I think if it matches with the topic, then that's good. But if it doesn't, then that's also fine. Like Linux Foundation and OCP test and validation don't really have a lot in common, in my opinion.
Oh no, I mean, we were talking about generally the progress made around open firmware and open systems inside HPE, and it's good to mention all the traction that's happening within OCP and all that.
Okay.
Just to wrap on this, the GPU compliance, is that the one titled Standardizing RAS Requirements for GPU and Accelerators in Hyperscale Computing?
We don't have anyone from that group today. I don't know, maybe Young, maybe you're familiar with this, with Bush and Rajat.
With GPU compliance, what's the question?
Yeah.
Young. Yeah, the question is do you recall the name of the talk? Is it Standardizing RAS Requirements for GPU and Accelerators in Hyperscale Computing?
Let me find that. I'll type that in.
Yeah, it would be by Rama Bhimanaduni and Vishal Jain. I don't know if that's the one.
I'm pretty sure Bhushan or Rajat would be in the presentation if they have.
Okay, I'll search for it.
Okay, thanks.
All right. Anything else, Vincent?
No, I appreciate it. Yeah, I'm putting those notes. It looks like all those talks are happening Wednesday, just as a note for folks. If you're thinking of which day to attend, it's looking like Wednesday is our day.
All right. Thanks for the details there, Vincent. Okay. Anything else someone may want to bring up in the last 20 minutes, or do we go into the hardware component discussion out of the LMT mapping?
Just maybe had a quick question for George or Yuan-Lin, if you guys know. Drew is giving 4 presentations at the OCP on various fault management topics, and I was looking for a potential tie-in here. I was wondering, did we ever standardize on the output for error monitor and how the CPR logs go in there? We were only looking at the sort of the decoder ring output.
There is a design doc. I'm not sure about the implementation.
Okay, let me, if you could maybe send me the design doc over an email, I'll take a look at it and see if there's anything that's worth inserting or not. If not, it's not a big deal, but if it's one more call out, it wouldn't hurt.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, so in that case, I don't know, Satish or Hua, do you wanna start on the discussion with the hardware component and the link?
Yeah, well, you want to forward or?
Yeah, like provide a bit of context to get started on it. If we have any current ideas and anything you would like a discussion from the whole group here.
Okay, well, let me start. Basically, okay, so lane margining is associated with I think PCIe link, and in our discussion, we kind of set that scope as the component scope, because that's something we can take some action on as a link. So with that, so how do we kind of define or describe a PCIe link? how do I fit that in the hardware info template? That's the discussion. I think one proposes to use the 2 endpoint, or even if we just use 1 endpoint, if we know that it's a link, I think it's specific enough to point to that. Using a PDF, or in another idea is just use the bus number in PCIe bus hierarchy. The bus kind of a link definitely has a bus number, but not necessarily the other way. A bus doesn't always is a physical link, right? So we can use that, but that's our decision. We want to see what's the best way to describe this link concept.
So can I just weigh in here? So I don't know how other people are using the hardware info, but at Google we use that for like identifying field replaceable units. So I'm struggling to imagine what the FRU would be in a PCI link. Like if something went wrong, would you just rip out the whole link, or I'm just sort of wondering if maybe this isn't hardware info in the same sense.
So you're correct on that, George. Like in the spec as well, hardware info is correlated with a physical device at fruable level, which is why this came up again. Like we had another discussion to make it a bit more abstract, because it's the same semantic in when you have 2 GPUs and an NVLink between them, or you have a client server, hosts, like 2 different hosts, and you have network between them, and it's like is the network the non-physical thing that supports the traffic, is that a hardware component? So in a more broader sense, I guess the question is, how do we map this onto something in the spec right now, considering that we have DUTs, we have hardware components, and we have subcomponents, which are like under FRU level. Go on.
Sorry, it broke up a little bit just now. I missed a little bit what you just said, but I was thinking the test kind of will identify if there's a problem, and not necessarily pinpoint where the root cause, where the problem came from. Right? It's not a debugging tool. So you wanna, I think we're skipping steps, like say a test will point to where exactly the root cause of the problem, so we can swap it and change it. I think that's too far of a stretch here. So if we always associate the test with a replaceable component, that kind of forces us to have all these debugging features embedded in the test and to help pinpoint where the problem is. I think that's not the intention of this test. Test is just saying if you have a good quality signal, if there's a problem or not.
Here's a question for you, Juan, and I would like George's opinion on this as well. At any point in time, let's say a single step in this diagnostic data collection thing, it doesn't need to do debugging. I'm not associating any other semantic other than gathering the error count, let's say from LMT, right, from margining. At any point in time, there is one device which transmits things, and there is one device which receives on a particular lane from a particular link, and with a specific configuration in that, your test probe is like offset this amount of millivolts and this amount of time, right? In this scenario, if everything is configuration, Like, you know where the test probe is, you know who the RX endpoint is and where it is located in physical terms. Would it be reasonable to say that the hardware component is the cards, the BDF, which has the RX endpoint on the lane connected to it?
No, I don't think it's sufficient because, well, it depends on how you want to use that information. If you just want to use that to identify the link, that's sufficient. If you want to use it to pinpoint where the failure, which component to replace, who's at fault, then that's not accurate.
Yeah, I think this gets complicated because of the retimers in the middle. Like if you imagine there is a device A sending a device B, and device B is getting margined, and we are getting measurements from device B. But if device B reports an error, it could be device A or a retimer in the middle, or it could be device B itself.
Are the retimers throwable, or
No.
are they part of the main baseboard?
Out of the board, yes.
Okay, so what if the baseboard with the retimer? No, what if the baseboard is a hardware component because it physically exists, and the retimer is a subcomponent of this? So when you specify the RX endpoint, this can be on a retimer or it can be on a PDF card, right?
Right.
So you say, okay, the transmitter is the thing which exercises the link, abstractly speaking, right? It just transmits things. It may still be at fault if at the receiver side you see errors and so on. But let's ignore that for now. Let's just say this is something that produces traffic for you. And in this case, if you say, okay, my component can be the baseboard, or it can be a BDF receiver card, and the subcomponent is the RX endpoint on the retimer, or is the RX endpoint on the link that goes to the receiver card, then you are able to say, okay, these measurements are taken from this physical coordinates because you have physical things that map to the hardware components, and you have the subcomponents coordinates that go lower than that. Obviously, both of these may be flattened to some extent. But in this case, the hardware component does actually match to a physical thing. Now, the only question remains is if you want to blame a specific piece for errors, you have two endpoints, right? So you have the transmitter and you have the receiver. The receiver is clearly identifiable, right? Because I just described how that works. But the transmitter can also be a hardware component in itself, and you can say, okay, the link doesn't work, and it may be because of either this hardware component, which is the transmitter, or this hardware component, which is the receiver place where the receiver endpoint is specifically, where you saw the errors. So baseboard or BDF device.
Can I add something to it? There are hardware components on the link that may not have a BDF identification. For example, say just even without retimer, okay, we have two board and connect with a cable. Okay, and the cable, okay, one side is cable, the other one is a plug-in kind of adapter to the cable to the PCIe slot. Okay, usually maybe if it's the adapter or cable has defect, that's the cheapest component to swap, but it doesn't have a good BDF identification, but it's part of the link. So the only way I think when we see a problem on a link, like link margin fail, right? We cannot pinpoint what the problem is. The only way we can pick which one to swap is some way we swap things to exonerate certain components, and then make sure, okay, we already test these things. It works very well, robustly, with some our basically it's solid. Then we rule these out from the failure. Then the cause of the failure must be this one, the DUT or something, right? So that's the only way. So sometimes if we use these tests to qualify our tester structure, right? We cannot. We have to make sure all the pieces in the test infrastructure is exonerated from failure, from problem.
And they are identifiable, right? And that they are identifiable, because if you want to exonerate a particular piece, you want to say what that piece is. You want to identify it.
Well, some stuff doesn't have identification in the system, like as a cable, for example, cable. How do you identify it?
That is a good question. Like, that is the thing we're trying to get at, right?
Yeah.
I'd like to hear your opinion, George, on this, because you have prior examples of how we use hardware components. So what do you think about this description?
I'm sort of wondering if maybe it's possible to not represent it using hardware info. Can you have a diag that doesn't, given that it can't diagnose the actual fru, why even try and just avoid hardware info altogether? Is that an option?
So in a sense, what we're talking about now isn't the diagnosis itself. We're at the level of providing measurements, right, which are correlated to hardware components. And the diagnosis may be somewhere at a higher level, like a higher order function. But your question is if we can output all of this data without hardware components. I don't know if that's feasible, because the measurements need to be linked to something that produced the measurement, and that is a hardware component.
Right. Well, I mean, strictly speaking, the measurement doesn't have to be tied to a hardware component. I'm just trying to think if it's possible to have like some unstructured way of representing it until, at some future point we can represent it in the spec. But, the output of this diag is basically, okay, this link is not sufficient. And then somebody's going to have to go in and do manual steps to figure out what is the actual repair step. So we wouldn't be able to use this diag in the same way that we use other diags in automatically determining what's wrong.
I have a question based on this to Hua and Satish. If we had a less specific or comprehensive output right now, in the sense of what George just said, we'll output measurements, whatever, but it's not clearly specified which hardware components these map to in terms of what the spec says. Would it be a huge technical depth in the future to change from this to actually be specific enough for the source of the measurements, regarding the source of the measurements in the scope of repairs?
I don't think it's going to be a major change. I still think we need to stick with the source of the measurement, like the way you said. Like, we are identifying issues in a certain RX endpoint, and we should we should report the hardware info based on the RX receiver ID. It could be a retimer, it could be a BDF, or it could be a KWA. But changing, getting to that point probably is harder, because, as I was mentioning, it's very hard to pinpoint the root cause. It's just a symptom at this point, and root cause need to be done either manually or running the test in a different environment. And then, I think changing from where we are right now to a point where we can identify the root cause, it shouldn't be an issue. Although it takes some experiments to deal with, but converting an output shouldn't be a problem.
I want to add to that is, say, okay, two separate scenarios. Like, say, in manufacturing, okay, when we do run the test in assembly line testing, we know we kind of know our test structure is robust, or assume that, then we can use the hardware info to pinpoint the dot. And if it fail, it has to be the dot, right? Because all the rest of the link is solid. Then we can use that. Whatever we do replace is at the dot. Okay, that's the assumption we can make. But the other scenario is in the data center. If we want to use this one, we cannot say which part is assumed to be no problem free, right? So in that case, we cannot simply use hardware info to pointing finger.
Okay, so I've heard a couple of things, and we're kind of on time, like 2 minutes left. What I would suggest is we can continue the discussion on GitHub, where it's been updated by Satish. If you wanna have a different call, like the one from last week, we can set that up as well. And I can add to the GitHub discussion the thing that I said today, basically with going closer to the RX endpoint and the hardware component and all of that. Now, it seems to me that you, Satish, you think that is a reasonable approach.
Yeah, sounds good. You can do that.
Okay, cool. So then thanks everyone for joining today, and we'll see you in 2 weeks, not next week.
All right, cheers guys. Bye.
Bye.